I had it, time to go.
Hi, I'm Madame Pamita, and this is Madame Pamita's Parlor of Wonders. You can find me online at parlorofwonders.com. Well, for this episode, I'm going to be teaching you how to do a flannel poppet. This is like what everybody calls a traditional voodoo doll. You know, this is the real one you see in the movies, the one that you've seen pictures of. I've taught you how to do other poppets and other videos that are much more straightforward and actually fairly simple to make. But the flannel poppet is the sort of the one that's well known, and I think it's worth showing you how to do it. It's a very complicated and multi-step process, but you know, good things come with hard work sometimes. So what you're going to need for your poppet are a few things. You're going to need some cloth. You're going to need some cotton for filling. You're going to need some herbs, of course, and some sewing materials that we'll get into, including a pattern, some scissors, and so on, and then something for petition paper that you can also put into that poppet. You could also bring in personal concerns, things that are part of the person that you are targeting, something that belongs to them. You can do a poppet for many, many things. You can do a poppet, of course, in the movies. It's done to harm people, but that's not the only way you can use a poppet. You can use a poppet for protection. You can use a poppet for bringing someone success. You can also use a puppet, of course, for inviting love into your life, and that's what we're going to be working on today, which is a love poppet. So first things first, we're going to talk about the material. You can get a piece of flannel, just a regular piece of flannel is very good. I've got here a piece of beige colored flannel that's like a skin tone, and you can use that. But another thing that you can do is you can use something that has been worn by the person that you're targeting. So for example, I have a red flannel shirt here that for our purposes, we'll say was worn by the person that I'm targeting. Hasn't been washed, still has their essence on it, maybe their sweat, definitely some DNA is on it. And that can be something quite valuable and powerful. On top of this, we're doing a love poppet, and it's in red so that it's in this great love color as well. So all in all, working with this shirt, which is a red flannel shirt, worn by the person that I'm targeting and hasn't been washed yet, is a great start for our poppet. So the first thing you're going to do is get the fabric cut so that you can cut out your pattern. So we're going to cut out a piece of the fabric. Just enough so that it will fit this pattern. And we're going to do front and back. So let's just say that this is about enough here to get the front and back in. You don't have to use a shirt. Of course, you could use any fabric, and it doesn't have to even be flannel. If you have a underwear, for example, of the person that has been worn and hasn't been washed, or a t-shirt or jeans or something like that, you can make a poppet out of that fabric. So here we have our piece of fabric for our poppet. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to fold it in half, because we're going to be cutting out a front and a back to our poppet. And let's see, is that going to be enough? Yes. So we're going to then take our pattern and we're going to cut it out almost completely. And then we're going to pin it to that fabric. So you need some straight pins. There they are. So this is what you do. You put some straight pins in to keep your fabric and the pattern all in one place. This is basic sewing techniques. Sewing 101. Used to be back when I was a little girl, every girl learned how to sew something, right? That was just the way. Now it seems like very few people know how to sew by hand. And so these things that are kind of well known to anybody that's sewn before may not be so well known to those of you out there who have not sewn before. Okay, so we pin down our pattern onto the doubled up fabric so that it's nice and together. And now what we're going to do is we're going to cut around this black line so that we have our pattern completely cut out. Okay. So there we have our 2 pieces of flannel cut out in the shape of the pattern. You can get a pattern online. If you look up Poppet's Voodoo doll pattern, you'll find lots of them for free online. Or you could use, for example, if you have a large gingerbread man cookie cutter, you could use that and trace that on a piece of paper and use that as your pattern. Or you could just freehand a pattern if you want. All of those are options for you. So once you have cut out your pattern, you're going to take the paper off, but you're going to pin the flannel back together again because we got to keep those 2 sides together. So it's like take it off and then repin it. So now we have our 2 pieces of flannel without the pattern on it anymore put together. So now what we're going to do is do some sewing on the border of the pattern. Now there's a couple choices that you have here. You can either sew the pattern on the outside and then turn it inside out if you want a really neat seam. But if you like a more rustic sort of kind of rustic, rough looking, old-timey looking poppet, you may want to just leave the seam on the rough edges here and leave those outward. I kind of prefer that look. I kind of like a homemade rustic look. So that's what we're going to do, but I'll show you how to turn the inside out as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start down here at the bottom of the foot and we're going to go all the way around. And we're going to leave this part at the crotch that we're going to leave open because we're going to need that open for stuffing, and we're going to sew that together at the end. So in this case, you can take a contrasting, you can take a matching thread. I like to use embroidery floss because it's nice and thick, but you could use regular needle and thread. You could use a contrasting color or you could use a matching color. I'm going to ut a contrasting color because I'm going to make that really rough, sort of looking, rustic looking sort of poppet here. So I'm going to leave it looking like that. Thread your needle, tie knot in the thread at the end. And then you can start. I'm going to start on this side. Now, there's different stitches that you can use. If you are more of a sewer, you could do a blanket stitch on the end, which you can look that up online if you want to know how to do that. But I'm just going to, for our purposes, do the very simple running stitch, which is just in and out with the thread and make it very kind of big stitches. Like so. Just a simple running stitch. But you can, of course, can do much fancier stitches that are going to hold it together very nicely. I don't mind a running stitch though. It looks a little, it looks like a real homemade down home poppet. So as we do this, you can be, as you're stitching, be saying your wishes, John Smith, fall in love with me, or whatever it is that you want for your poppet as you're making each of those stitches. You might say it, the message of what it is that you're wanting with each stitch. So when we get down to the bottom here, we're going to stop at this point. Now at this point your poppet is all sewn together, so you can get rid of those pins. That's the one thing you can do, which will prevent you from getting stabbed. That's always a good thing, right? Nobody wants to get stabbed. And get rid of those. Okay, now look what we have here. We've got this gorgeous poppet ready to go. Let's see, get squared away here. And we've got a space here that we can stuff the poppet. You can also turn the poppet inside out. I'll kind of show you what it looks like. These stitches are not super conducive to it being turned inside out, but it's not too bad. So if we turn our poppet inside out, it's going to look a little something like this. I would probably do finer stitches and use regular thread and not the embroidery floss, but here's his head poking out. You could pull the arms out and so on. You get the idea there. I'm not going to do it all the way because that's not what I want with my poppet. I want it the other way. I like the stitches showing. I want it to look like a kind of like an old New Orleans turn of the century poppet. So we're going to get them back the other way. All right, so we've got our poppet ready to stuff. This is the exciting and fun part of this. So with this, we're going to stuff in through here and get that cotton in. We're going to, with that cotton, you can do a couple of things. You could put, for example, with cotton, I'm using cotton balls. Of course, you can use regular stuffing that you can buy for pillows and things like that at the fabric store, but it's so easy to find just some nice cotton at the the drugstore and just use that. You could put a little bit of a condition oil on that cotton, not too much, but you could put, like for example, I've got Love Me oil. I could put a few drops of that on the cotton before I put it in, saying, of course, my intention or prayer for what it is that I want. Kind of blending it in there and fluffing up my cotton a little bit, and then stuffing it up into the poppet. As you stuff that poppet, you want to alternate cotton or stuffing with some herbs. We're going to put herbs in this poppet. So we have some here, jasmine. These are all love herbs for various different purposes. Jasmine is a very exciting and intoxicating, romantic sort of flower. We have juniper berries, which are about sexual passion. Lavender, which is calm energy, definitely like a warm and romantic sort of feeling. Hibiscus, again, for lots of passion, and lovage for this really intense feelings of love. So we can put those in as we go along. Again, just like you do with any kind of magical working, you ask the herbs to do what it is that you want to do. So jasmine flowers make John Smith feel romantic feelings for me. If you want to put the herbs in specific parts, for example, you can stuff those jasmine flowers up into the head portion and say, may he be thinking about me all the time. Or put it in the hand portion, may his hands long to touch me, and so on. So you can put an herb in, put some more cotton. You could put some more condition oil on the cotton if you want. Start stuffing that poppet in. If you need some help, you can get a chopstick or a pencil or something long and pokey to get into those skinnier areas like that. And so on. Just keep going, putting some more herbs. Juniper berries make our love passionate. You can put it in his arms, make his arms long to hold me, right? Something like that. And keep stuffing. Put some lavender in for some sweetness and calmness in the romance. Hibiscus flower in for passion and excitement. Some lovage in to bring in those true love feelings. Now, when you get about halfway through stuffing it, you're going to want to put in your petition paper. So petition paper can be very, that very strict sort of petition paper that I describe in my petition paper video, or you can write a simple wish, or even write something like, John Smith loves Mary Jones. If that's what, if your name is Mary Jones, you can write that kind of thing, or a heart with your initials in it, or anything like that. But a petition paper, just saying what it is that you want. So I just wrote a simple, John Smith loves me. And you can fold that toward yourself, bringing him closer, turn it to the right, fold it again toward yourself, turn it to the right, fold it again, and keep turning to the right and folding it till you have a very small little packet. In addition, you can also be putting in personal concerns. If you have some of his hair, you can put some of his hair in there, or a fingernail clipping, or something that he's worn, or some kind of personal concern such as that. You can be putting that in along with these herbs and the petition paper, and that will add definitely add some strength to this and connect it to him even more closely. If you have something that he's worn, but it's not something that you can turn into a poppet, maybe you have a sock, for example. It's too small to turn into a poppet, although you could make a poppet out of a sock, but let's say for some reason it's not suitable for that, then you can take a piece of that sock and put it inside, or you can make some clothing for your poppet out of that sock. So now once you have your poppet fully stuffed and is nice and has all those herbs and things and personal concerns and petition papers and that so forth in it, now you're ready to close up that opening that you made. So you just continue sewing, and if you have turned your poppet inside out, you're going to sew these stitches very neatly and nicely to make it look nice. But since mine is a real rustic one, don't have to worry about that so much. And if you're having trouble holding it together while you're sewing at this point, because it is a little, stuffed, you can pin them together with your straight pins again to keep them together while you're sewing. But I'm just sort of pinching it together as I sew and keeping that stuffing inside. So as you finish up your stitches, again with these stitches you can be saying your prayer or intention of what it is that you're wanting. If you want to give it a lot of focus, that's a great way to do this working. You're really stitching it in, you're knotting it in, you're really putting some binding into it when you do that. And then finishing up, closing up the poppet all the way. Finally, when you get to the end, or at any point you run out of the thread too, you tie a knot. Again, tie that knot. You can say your intention, really tying that into binding that and giving some oomph to it by speaking what it is that you want as you tie that knot. I like to tie a couple knots just to make sure. You can do a magical number, three knots, 2. All right, so then once you're done with that, you trim off the excess, trim off that excess, there we go. And so we have the foundation of our poppet here. Lastly, you want to sew some features onto the poppet. So you can sew some eyes, a mouth, you can sew some hair. I can show you how to do that really quickly. So for hair, you could pick a thread that has the same color as the person's hair. And what you do is you just pull a thread through and then tie a knot in it, or tie a couple knots in it. And then trim it off. Depending if they have long hair, you can leave it long, of course. And keep tying that hair into the top like that. I'm just going to do 3. I'm not going to do a full head of hair because that'll take too long. but you get the picture. All right, so you see there's some little hair sticking up, and you can see if you did a lot more of those, you'd really have some nice hair sticking up there. Then you want to sew some facial features. You can do, since I'm doing a very sort of rustic doll, I can just do some eyes. You can do a couple of things. You can do X's for eyes. I like to do like a little knot for the eyes, just to have something there. You can tie a knot a couple of times, get that knot really sort of big. Again, you can choose the eye color that's closest to your target, or you can, in my case, I'm just doing a contrasting color. Just tying a few knots, very simple to do. Trying to show you the easiest way to something that you can get quite complex with. You know, you can, as you're making this doll, you can really get very fine with your stitches and fancy with it all. But this is one that anyone can do, and that's what I want to teach you. Something that feels doable. And then finally, we're going to sew a mouth. So for that, since you could sew before it's reversed and then reverse it if you want to be fancy, but we're just going to do a very, very simple one. So I'm going to tie a knot in the end of my thread so I can do this quickly. This is called a back stitch. A back stitch is you're going to go forward and then back through the hole that you originally put it in. It's a little bit more complicated, but it lets you do a continuous line without a break. Like the running stitch has breaks in it, but the back stitch doesn't. And then finish it up with a knot. So there we have our very basic poppet. What you do with the poppet is you are going to then work that poppet in a way to get that, to influence that person. This is very coercive sort of magic, but you're going to influence that person through this doll. So the first thing you have to do, as I've said in other videos, you can watch the other videos, but I'll give you a quick rundown. You take some of the oil and you baptize that doll as the person's name. So you take just a little spot and you say, I baptize you, John Smith, as I do to you, so I do to John Smith. You will obey me, you will do as I say, and so on. So I'm putting that on his forehead as I'm saying that. You can also put some on his heart and say, you will love me, you will want to have sex with me, whatever it is that you're wanting to influence that person in that way, and anoint that doll with that oil. Then you're going to take that doll and you're going to treat it as you would treat your lover and enticing your lover to come to you. So you would, caress it, pet it, talk to it. You can sleep with it in your bed. You can keep it in your underwear drawer when you're not at home or you're not using it, and so on. And that's the way you work with a fabulous flannel poppet. This is super traditional, super old-timey, and a fabulous kind of working for doing some coercive love magic. I'm Madame Pamita. This is Madame Pamita's Parlor of Wonders. You can find me online at parlorofwonders.com.